Despite its popularity now and its status as a cult classic, it may come as a surprise to some viewers that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was a box office bomb when it first hit theaters, only making around $50 million on a $60 million budget. From competition at the box office to a niche target demographic, join me today as we analyze all the factors which led to this film unfortunately flopping. Additionally, we'll explore the history behind this movie, and I'll offer up some of my personal thoughts on the project. Development on the film adaptation of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World actually started way back in 2004, once the first volume of Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley was published. The publisher of the series, Oni Press, contacted film producer Mark Platt to propose a film adaptation at the same time the series was being written. Platt brought the idea to Universal Studios, who then contacted filmmaker Edgar Wright in 2004 to adapt the comic, who had just released his film Shaun of the Dead. Screenwriter Michael Bacall would be hired to pen the script in 2004, while Wright was working on his other film, Hot Fuzz. Wright and Bacall would write the script together, along with help from O'Malley, and the second draft of the script, which became the main draft for the film, was submitted right at midnight on the night the writer's strike was supposed to begin in October 2007. Since the film was being worked on at the same time of the comic series, material from the sixth installment into the series, Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour, was not included in the film. Casting for the principal characters kicked off in June of 2008, with test shoots taking place in July. With the film being such an involved project with so many different moving parts, a year of preparation was needed before principal photography began. Wright also had to stop working on his ill-fated Ant-Man screenplay for 2 years during the making of Scott Pilgrim. The first to be cast was Scott Pilgrim himself, who Wright always imagined as Michael Cera. Universal wanted the character to be played by Seth Rogen, as Knocked Up had just come out and was a huge success, but Wright got his way on the casting. And honestly, thank goodness I could not see Seth Rogen in this role. Soon after, Mary Elizabeth Winstead signed on as Ramona Flowers, another actor Wright always had in mind for the character. Both Sebastian Stan and Robert Pattinson were considered for the role of Lucas Lee, but this was yet another character that Wright had a distinct vision for, that being Chris Evans. The rest of the cast would be filled up with lots of up-and-coming actors, such as Anna Kendrick, Aubrey Plaza, Kieran Culkin, and Brie Larson, as well as established names like Jason Schwartzman. While filming, Michael Cera and Aubrey Plaza briefly dated, which is where we get this iconic photo from. Filming officially kicked off in March of 2009, shooting in the same place the film is set in, Toronto, Canada. The movie originally ended with Scott getting back together with Knives, as this was filmed before the final book came out. This ending didn't work for several different reasons, and the test audiences were 50-50 on it. Once the final comic book came out, with Scott getting together with Ramona instead, the cast and crew decided to go back out and reshoot this ending instead, which Wright stated was his preferred ending. In fact, this new ending was shot just 3 months before the film was released. The initial budget of this movie was around $85 to $90 million. However, with the tax rebates, it landed closer in the $60 million range. But this is not factoring in marketing, distribution, or the theater's cuts, which often makes it so films have to double their budget at the box office in order to break even. And speaking of box office, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World hit theaters on August 13th of 2010, with an opening weekend gross of $10 million. It came in 5th in the box office behind The Expendables, Eat, Pray, Love, The Other Guys, and Inception. Domestically, it would go on to make $31 million, and overseas it would make $16 million for a total worldwide gross of $47 million. And against that budget of $60 million, this unfortunately made Scott Pilgrim a box office failure. However, the reviews were much better than the box office. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World currently holds an 83% critic and 84% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, in addition to a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb and a 3.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So that of course invites the question of why didn't this film make a splash at the theater, and what went wrong which caused it to bomb? There's quite a few reasons why Scott Pilgrim vs. the World failed at the box office, and the first one we need to look at is the movie itself. This movie is just a hard sell, as there's no others that are quite like it. A lot of people like to blame the marketing for this film failing, and while I agree to some extent, you have to admit that the marketing did faithfully represent the movie. And they reached out to fans too, promoting it heavily at Comic-Con, holding free screenings to create awareness, and trying to kickstart that great word of mouth. The problem is that the target demographic for this movie is pretty niche. It doesn't really appeal to people over 30, because when you have a mortgage and 2 screaming kids at home, a movie about a bunch of jobless 20-something indie slackers probably doesn't look all that interesting. It's also a film heavily ingrained in nerd and geek culture, with the whole comic book style and running video game motif. You compare Scott Pilgrim to other mainstream nerd-oriented properties which were popular around the same time, like Game of Thrones or the MCU, who at the start were able to satisfy both hardcore fans and general audiences. But Scott Pilgrim went full nerd. For the average audience, maybe the movie just looked a little too geeky and like they couldn't relate to it. Another factor we could look at is the main actor, Michael Cera. 2010 was a big time for Cera, as he was just coming off hits like Arrested Development, Juno, and Superbad. However, at the same time, he was also receiving criticisms for playing the same type of character in all these movies, and a type of niche character that had already been filled by the likes of Jesse Eisenberg for a long time. Although I personally love Cera as a performer, I can't deny these criticisms of playing the same character, and I understand why people at the time may not have liked him. We could also consider the time at which this film was released, August of 2010, right as the United States was recovering from the Great Recession. Many theater goers didn't have too much extra cash to spend on movies, especially late in the summer. Here's what box office guru Gitesh Pandya said about this. Scott Pilgrim could have worked better at a different time of year. The target audience of young people tend to get tapped out on cash by late summer and become even more picky with their few dollars left. I mean, you just look at the target audience that Scott Pilgrim was trying to attract and compare that to other movies that had come out right before it. It hit theaters on the same day as The Expendables for those who wanted action. It also came out on the same day as Eat, Pray, Love for those who wanted romance, and it came out 1 week after The Other Guys for those who wanted comedy. Not to mention, Inception was still dominating at the box office, which surely posed some competition. At its core, Scott Pilgrim is one of those movies that was pretty much built to be a cult classic. One of those movies where it doesn't look like something you like at first, but after your friend pesters you to watch it for months and you finally catch it on DVD or streaming after the fact, you fall in love with it. I'm sure this is the story for many Scott Pilgrim fans out there. The movie also just has a specific brand of humor that isn't really all that popular with widespread audiences. You compare the comedy in Scott Pilgrim to The Other Guys, which was playing at the same time. While The Other Guys is still funny, you have to admit the humor in that movie is a lot safer and reliable. It simply appeals to more people. Scott Pilgrim really reminds me of another cult classic, The Big Lebowski, in that regard. And just like The Big Lebowski, since its release, this movie has spawned its own fandom and culture. We got people dressing up as characters from the movie, we've had re-releases and special screenings, and we have the animated series Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which came out 10 years after the film hit theaters. And I think a factor that helped create Scott Pilgrim's cult status is a lot of the actors in the film became huge after the movie was released. While he did have the Fantastic Four under his belt, Chris Evans would debut as Captain America in 2011. Brie Larson would secure her Oscar in 2016 and become Captain Marvel in 2019. Kieran Culkin would star in Succession in 2018 and get his Oscar in 2025. And the list goes on and on. This movie just has an impressive ensemble cast, all of whom brought their A game. But it seems like Universal weren't too concerned about this film's performance, and they knew it would find its audience eventually. As Universal spokesman Paul Fluke said this about its box office: "Regardless of its perceived outcome, we are proud of this film and our relationship with the visionary and creative filmmaker Edgar Wright. Studios need to continue to offer audiences good and original ideas and films. Edgar has created a truly unique film that is both envelope-pushing and genre-bending, and when examined down the road, will be identified as an important piece of filmmaking. We have always been aware of the challenges of broadening this film to a mainstream audience. We do wish a greater number of people went to see the film, but hope that people will still make the effort to see this wonderful film." However, I think this could better be boiled down into 3 words that were sent by Universal's head of marketing, Michael Moses, to Edgar Wright when the film opened number 5 in the box office: years, not days. While it did take a few years, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World found its audience, and I'm so glad it did because I love this movie. Speaking of which, I would like to share some of my own thoughts about this film. But first, a quick recap of the plot on the off chance there's someone out there who hasn't seen this movie. The film, of course, follows Scott Pilgrim, who falls head over heels for a mysterious new girl in town called Ramona Flowers. However, in order to be with Ramona, Scott must defeat a league of her evil exes while also competing in a battle of the bands with his friends. It's odd to give my thoughts on a movie I actually like, since so often I'm covering the worst of the worst on this channel. But I'll try my best. I love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I mean, is it any surprise? I'm a nerdy white dude in my 20s. No big shocker there. Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors of all time, and all his films have had a huge impact on the type of media I interact with and have shaped my tastes over the years. Hell, I even love Last Night in Soho, which I know is referred to as the weakest in his filmography. By far, my favorite aspect about Scott Pilgrim is how not a single frame is wasted. You can tell that every single second of this movie was thought out from pre to post-production, from every visual gag to audio jingle. You have graphics accompanying the dialogue when exposition is told, you have comic book-like titles, you have crazy split screens, and you have audio cues for just about every piece of blocking. The movie is just filled to the brim with personality, and I'm always in awe on how effective it all is. And this movie just zips by so quickly, as there's this manic energy that carries it from scene to scene. And I think this is due to the awesome scene transitions that are prevalent in this film. Whether it be location changes in the middle of shot reverse shots, or camera wipes that correspond with the environment, Wright just understands how to keep a constant rhythm going in his movies. And that also ties into the humor in this film. It's so fast-paced and effective. Oftentimes in comedies, you see them milk a joke for too long until they ruin it. Although I am a fan of his, this is a problem I have with Will Ferrell movies. But in Scott Pilgrim, they deliver the punchline, and you don't even get a second to think about it until it's on to the next joke. It may be too fast-paced for some viewers, but it scratches my brain just right. Scott Pilgrim is also just a hilarious protagonist. What I love about him is that he is such an unlikable loser for a majority of the runtime. He's a pathetic, unemployed ass who is afraid of confrontation and is dating a high schooler. He's a terrible boyfriend who goes on a whole journey fighting 7 evil exes just to become an average boyfriend. It's so funny, and Michael Cera is the perfect man for the job. The ensemble cast is also so much fun. You have some very big and unique personalities, all of which are played with so much confidence. And I love how each battle just wasn't the same thing over and over, and they made an effort to do something new each time. Yeah, Scott Pilgrim kicks some ass, but he's also tricking people to skate downstairs and drink half and half to get the upper hand in these battles. Lastly, the music is just killer and really completes the whole movie. Like, garage rock isn't a genre I would usually listen to in my spare time, but it's perfect for this film, and the framing device of the Battle of the Bands was perfect for introducing all the evil exes. I don't know what else there is to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. It just rocks. So let's wrap it up. From its inception, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World had an uphill battle. It has a pretty niche target demographic, which made it a hard sell. It came out as the economy was recovering from a recession. It had a lead star who was getting some flack at the time for playing the same character, and it was overshadowed by bigger films that came out on the same weekend. All of this culminated in the movie bombing at the box office, but luckily over the years, it has gained a cult following and now gets the flowers that it deserves. But what are your thoughts on Scott Pilgrim? Did you enjoy the film like I did, or do you have problems with it? I'd love to know down in the comments. This has been Tom from Isenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. And here's a clue for next week's video.
King Arthur came a lot, didn't he?
I think you mean that he's associated with the court of Camelot.